Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of the paper 3 walkthrough. Please make sure you've watched the first video before you watch this one. This is a tag on to the first paper 3 walkthrough. This is me using students' answers to kind of flesh out some of the information I spoke about previously, and it's also for the evaluate questions I'm also using some new ideas there to try to help the students that are struggling still with how to go about answering an evaluate question. First off, what I'm going to do here is actually go through the sample assessment material, which is on the exam board website for paper 3. So we're going to have to scroll down here to paper 3. That would be useful. Here we go. There you go, paper 3. All right, and if you want to access this at any time, just go to Google, just put in Google Edexcel A-level geography. This page will come up, and hit specification sample assessments, come down to the bottom here, and you can access the A-level geography sample assessment material, basically a mock exam with a mark scheme that you can use and look at yourselves. And if you hit exam materials, you can actually access previous exams here as well. Let's go back to the exam paper. So here it is. We know paper 3 is 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and they're worth 70 marks. Okay, scrolling down, first question. So we've got 4 marks down here, and it is worth 4 marks. Sorry, and it is an explained question. And I've got explain why tropical rainforests are globally important. Globally important physical system. Now, first off, it doesn't say explain one reason. Now, if it said explain one reason, I would have to develop one reason 3 times. Point, develop, point, develop, point, develop, final point. Okay. It doesn't say that, so I can approach this in 2 different ways. Now, on the PowerPoint here, I've already typed out 2 responses. Now, example number 1 here, this is one way you could go about it, and that is to basically develop 2 points. Okay, so that would be if I just pick up the pen here, hit draw. So one way you could do it is go point 1 and then develop it, and then do point 2 and develop it. So if we look at this answer here, and for ease, I'm going to highlight it. So we've got example 1, all right. Tropical rainforests are large terrestrial carbon stores, which means that they maintain. Okay, let's just backtrack there. All right, so first off, I'm just going to get rid of that, rub that. Let's start again. So example 1, tropical rainforests are large terrestrial carbon stores. That's going to get this person 1 mark. It's a point. Then they've developed it, and they've developed it with which means that. So which means that they mean the balance of carbon cycle. Then that's going to be maintain. Sorry everyone, it's getting on a little bit. Let's just backtrack here. My bad. Let's rub this out. I'm not going to restart, and let's just type that back. Let's go back on here. It's maintain, I think is what that's meant to be. Let's go back on that. Okay, so back to highlighting. Sorry about that, everyone. So, okay, so tropical rainforests are large terrestrial carbon stores. 1 mark. Now they've developed it. I know that because they've used the phrase which means that they maintain the balance of the carbon cycle as plants take in carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. Okay, so if I was to mark this, I'd say there's 1 mark, which means that is signposting me as the marker or examiner that they're developing the point, and they've told me that they are maintaining an element of the carbon cycle. So there's 2 marks, tick that. Okay, 1 mark, develop, 2 marks. Now, they're going on to give me a second point here. So they've done this, tick that, they're going to do this here. Okay, I would like them to kind of make it more obvious. So I would probably start this as a new paragraph, okay, or a new sentence here. And I would also maybe use a phrase that signposts the examiner to a new point. A second point is, okay, nevertheless, however, but to just give a clear signpost for starting a second developed point. And here it is. We now got rainforest also are large water stores, which helps to maintain the water cycle. Now, this isn't a proper development. It's not this is not fully developed. Okay, I'm not really getting much development from the which helps to. So I would say that this was just 1 point. So what this person's done is they've done one developed point, but they've got a second point, but it's not fully developed. So overall, this is going to be worth 3 marks out of 4. Okay. What I'd like to see, and if I just take over here, is a development, okay, which would be something like, as a result, they produce large amounts of evapotranspiration, which creates clouds. And you could probably go on and develop that into stating that it therefore maintains the equatorial climate. But I would give that as a development, clearly signposted by using a key phrase as a result to the examiner, and then we would highlight this off, and that would be my next mark. I would now have had 2 developed points, and that would give me a 4 out of 4. Okay, example number 2. The other way you could do this is basically taking 1 point, and then you're going to develop it, and you're going to develop it, and you're going to develop it. So point, develop, new point, develop, new point, new develop, new point. Okay, basically another way to look at it, this would be 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, and that the ones are all points, point, 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 and the pluses would be your key phrases, like this leads to, this means that, or as a result. Okay, let's have a look at this student here. So I'm going to just use, I'll just keep on moving between yellow and green. So we've got tropical rainforests are a large carbon store. That'll get you a mark there. That's our first mark. It's a point. And then let's go on. There is, going to green so it's easier to see the differences in points. There's only 13% of rainforest cover in Africa, but it stores 9% of terrestrial carbon. It's an exemplification. It's going to be enough to develop that point to get your second one. Keep going, we'll go back to yellow. This is due, I think that phrase there is a connective phrase. It's not one of the key phrases I like, but I think it's enough to say we're developing the point. This is due to plants using carbon for photosynthesis. There's another point here. And then lastly, we'll go back to green. This causes kind of giving me another connective phrase. This causes carbon to be used by the plants for energy. All right, so we've got another development. So they've done this down here. I've got 1 point, developed, another point, developed, another point, developed. So that's my 4 out of 4. Now, I would say with this here, these are student responses that I've just marked, is that the bottom one, I flipped between 2 out of 4 and 4 out of 4. I had to really think about whether this was a proper development here. Okay, there is only. I had to think carefully about this is due and this causes. Okay, I would like the language to be that of this means that or as a result. Okay, some other connective phrase that clearly shows, okay, that you're developing your point, and I would like it to be more concrete, the link from the previous point to the next. Okay, I shouldn't have to infer that much as the marker. Here, I think the students done just enough that I'm not having to infer that much, and the development is secure. But again, I think we could really tidy up this to make it a more concrete signposted 4 out of 4 for the examiner. Moving on. Okay, next 2 ideas here. I'm going to move to the visualizer, and I'm going to look at same question, but we're thinking about space provided, and we're thinking about using figures. So give me a second. All right, here we go. Okay, let's just increase that. And okay, here we go. So this is the same question. We can see at the top here, but explain why tropical rainforests are a globally important physical system. But my point here is this student has bullet pointed me 4 reasons why. Biodiversity, economic logging and tourism. Well, it's physical geography, natural. We're not going to get any marks for human anyway, and that they support life. Now, my point here, without obviously reading down here, is let's think logically. Okay, the examiners or the exam board have given you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sentences. There's no way that you're going to get 4 out of 4 at A level by bullet pointing. Okay. So my point here is space. The space given to you is the space they expect you to fill, by and large. Okay. Some people have small handwriting, they get lots of words on a sentence, and they're very, very succinct. That's not the majority. Majority of people are not like that, and that you will be using the space provided by the exam board. So 2 points here. We do not bullet point. Second point, if you are answering a question in prose and you're only using about 2/3 or half the space, so let's say your answer went only up to about where this pen is, it's because you're not using key phrases. You're not using this means that, or as this suggests that, or as a result. You're not developing your points. Start to develop your points. Okay, next. All right, another idea here, or not another idea, another point to make exam skill wise, just be careful. Now, I've said in our first walkthrough of paper 3 that we must use the resource booklet thoroughly, synoptically, analytically throughout paper 3. That's true, except on questions where it doesn't ask you to refer to a resource or study a resource. It's not really needed. Here's an example. This student has used figure 1 here, figure 1 here, figure 3 here. This question does not say study a resource, refer to a resource. This isn't needed. Okay, this student's probably actually wasted time on a 4-mark question, which is about 5 minutes in the exam, lifting information out which actually didn't help them pick up marks. So don't refer to a resource. Most of the questions in this exam will expect you to use multiple resources, but please be careful, read the question, only do so if it asks you to. All right, moving on. So we've looked at explain, some ideas about space provided, using figures. And next one we're going to look at, before I move on to analyze, is back to the visualizer and just thinking very quickly about math skills. So we've got a Spearman's rank, fill in the kind of blanks table. They like this question. Please make sure that you understand and you've worked through these Spearman rank tables. It's on the SAM, the mark scheme is on the exam board. If you're struggling with Spearman's rank, again, can we please go to HLS Geography, get ourselves into the playlist, and come down to A-level maths, sorry. Okay, I recently clicked on it, so it's in the top left. Hit A-level maths, and on here is an example, worked example of Spearman's rank. And again, on the exam board website, hit teaching and learning materials, come down, hit show more, guidance, and you've got AS and A-level geography, maths for geographers, which is basically a booklet produced by the exam board that covers all the needed math skills, and there are work examples within there. Anyway, back to my point here, which is that one thing I'm finding with these questions is that we are dropping some easy marks because we're missing this here. It says show you're working, and it's worth 4 marks. Marks here are basically 1 mark for filling in the blanks appropriately, 1 mark here, 1 mark for the answer, and 1 mark for showing you're working out. If you do not show you're working out, you're going to drop a mark. Make sure you do it. Okay. All right, next. Okay, on to analyze questions. Okay, so you should have watched the first walkthrough before you got onto this. So we should already have an idea of what's expected in analyze. And I just want to look at a few bits and pieces of an analyze. So when we look at analyze questions, if I skip back to the PowerPoint here, I want you to make sure that when you look at the resource, you look at 3 things, okay? Which is 1, what's the overall trend, okay, from the data, from the resource. 2, pick out the extremes, because the extremes a lot of the time will help you with the trend and help you with number 3, the anomalies, okay? So look at those 3 and weave them into your answer. Let's go back to the visualizer. So this is from the SAMs here, and it gives the students information on 3 African countries. We've got Angola, Congo, and the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. And I've been given some development indicators across the top here, okay? And the question, if we skip to the actual exam, we'll go down here to this question here. And we've got this analyze question. Give me a second, sorry everyone, which tells me to study figure 3. As I said earlier, if it says study and it gives you a figure, you must use it. You're quoting information directly from that resource. Now, I've got analyze the differences in level of development for the 3 countries shown. So I'm going to think about, as I just said, the overall trend within my answer. I'm going to use data from the resource to support that trend. I'm also going to think about the extremes within the data set. And 3, I'm going to use this all to suggest some anomalies as well. So I'm looking at the level of development in the 3 countries. So what's the overall trend in level of development? Which one's more developed to least? What data extremes can I use to support that? And do those extremes also suggest some anomalies within that overall trend that I'm presenting? Now, if I go to the actual resource booklet, and I was to look at these 3 countries, and I've got Angola, Congo, and the DRC. So first off, a lot of students suggested that Angola, was the most developed, and they used the income per person, and they also used the average annual growth rate. So what they were looking for here was you to really analyze in depth, and I would probably actually say that my ranking would probably be Congo first, then the DRC, and then the third I would say, Angola second, and the third would be a DRC. And then I'm going to use data, okay, from the actual resource to back that up. Now, the data I'm going to use here is to set the overall trend. And I'm going to say Congo is the most developed. And what I'm going to use there is the fact that it's got the second largest income. Population, it's got the lowest population age 0 to 14. That's important. It's telling me that it is reducing in terms of its youthful population, its dependence between 0 to 14. And remember, a reduction in youthful population tells us a country is developing, okay, away from being a LDC. It's got the highest amount of population with electricity. It's got the lowest infant mortality rate per 1,000 live births, which is telling me it's invested in its healthcare infrastructure. Its life expectancy is also the highest here, 58, 6 years on average more than Angola, okay, much higher than DRC. That's really important in showing how developed the country is. 6 years is a big deal. Its annual growth is not as large, and its Gini coefficient is in the middle here, okay? there's enough data here for me to suggest that Congo is the most developed in terms of its trend. Okay, and again, thinking about extremes, I can pick out some extremes here. I would say that infant mortality is an extreme, so that picking out that extreme and really focusing on that extreme analytically to support Congo being the most developed. I would also point out here that you know, it's not as extreme, but the fact that it has got that more youthful, less youthful population, more of electricity. I think overall the trend there, especially using that extreme of infant mortality, that is major in terms of differences between Angola and the DRC in supporting a more developed country. Now, I'm also going to concentrate on the extremes to pull out what could really compete with Congo being the most developed. And what I'm going to pick out here is clearly the income per person and the average annual growth of Angola. There's some extremes to maybe question whether Congo is the most developed. Okay, so I'm showing the examiner I'm being analytical because I've said Congo is the most. However, Angola does challenge it on 2 development indicators. But I'm not going to give it to Angola because even though it's earning and growing much more than Congo, there's an extreme here, okay, of 108, 102 in terms of its infant mortality rate. Okay, that would be an anomaly, right? That's an anomaly to the pattern of Angola being the most developed. It can't be the most developed because that result is suggestion that even though they're earning more per person, that the country is not investing in it, especially socially, to help the country develop. Okay, and then lastly, looking at other sort of extremes, like that is an extreme in terms of income per person, population 15% without access to electricity. These are 2 major extremes to support the fact that the DRC is the least developed, going back to my overall trends. Okay, all right, moving on, back to the PowerPoint. Next, okay, let's hit the evaluate questions. Okay, and first off, let's just go through the question in the actual paper. Okay, back to the paper here, and I'm just going to scroll down on here. Oh, actually, yeah, that's fine. I'm going to just scroll down in here. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through as much as I can. Go back to the paper. Sorry, everyone, give me a second. It's paper 2 LBY. Nearly there. All right, so back to paper 3, and we're going to go to the last question. So we've had our analyze, we've got the first 18 marker, and then we're on to the only 18 marker, question 5. Question 6 is that 24 marker. Okay, so we've got an evaluate question here. It says evaluate the view that the natural resources found in the 3 countries, that's Angola, DRC, and Congo, shown are more of a curse than a blessing for their people and the environment. And this is worth 24 marks, the highest tariff question on all 3 papers, obviously for paper 3 in saying that. Right, let's go across to my PowerPoint then. Okay, first off, when you get onto this question, I would like everyone to do the following, okay? I want you to, number 1, box, underline, highlight, whatever you prefer, the command word. Now, clearly, we know what that is. It's evaluate, okay? Number 2, I would like you to box, underline, highlight the key factors for your sides. And what I mean by that is, remember, evaluate questions are arguments. You're going to have one side of the argument and the second side of the argument, okay? That's what you're doing in an evaluate question. A lot of the time in the question, it'll give you the 2 sides, or it'll give you one of the sides and you've got to come up with, from your subject knowledge, the second side. We call these the factors of the argument, or the factors of the sides, or both sides of the argument. So if I go through the question, this question is nice. It gives me the sides. It's saying that the natural resources are more of a curse than a blessing. So I'm going to use these factors. That is going to be one side of my argument, that the resources are a curse on the three countries. And the second side is going to be that the resources are a blessing. Third one, box, underline, highlight the key geographical phrase, the one that they want you to keep going back to. Now, here, I think the phrases we're looking at are their people in the environment, and we could maybe say natural resources as well. There's probably two key geographical phrases. So we need to link our points we make in our argument. So both sides of the argument, we need to keep linking those points back to those phrases, back to the phrase natural resource, back to the phrase people in the environment. So back in the first walkthrough for paper 3, I went through the structure for this evaluate question. Go back, watch that if needed, but the different points and paragraphs you make must refer to those geographical phrases. Okay, now a couple of things here. Now, one is every point you make should follow P's. Okay, point, explain, evidence, analysis, and significance. Significance is the last thing you say in every developed point, every paragraph. You're saying how important is that point? How far does that point agree with it in this question being a curse? Or how far does that point agree with that point being a blessing for the people and the environment? Linking back to the key phrase, people in the environment and natural resources. Okay, some of us are still struggling with that, so I'm going to show you an example. All right, let's go back to the visualizer. Okay, and here I've just got a student's answer. Let's get that, and we're just going to look at this point at the bottom here. Okay. All right, and this is just to show the P structure. Some of us are struggling, especially with the S, the last part of P's. Okay, and this is just an example I found. I haven't looked at it in too much detail, but it looks, that it does the job. So here's the point. Okay, I've got the point. It starts here, and I'm going to underline it. The first thing, I'm just going to put P's here, P-E-E-A-S, and let's say blue for the point. So someone who would agree with me would say that mining has led to the exploitation of the younger population in the DRC. There's my point. And then we're going to explain it. Okay, in fact, let's not say explain, this is evidence. For example, of the 12 million independent miners in the DRC, around 20-30% of them are children. Okay, so we've got point evidence. You can go point evidence explain or point explain evidence. There is after this a wee bit of explanation. This accounts for the large population aged between 0 to 14 years old. I definitely say that could be developed further, but that'll do. All right, and then we're going into talking about significance here. So I'm going to jump down here into significance. This is greatly significant because by using children in the mines, they are able to have access to an education and learn skills. And I would say that the students actually backtracked on themselves and did a bit of analysis at the end. As a consequence of this, they are able to obtain jobs that would increase their own income and the GDP growth of the DRC, so are left in a vicious cycle. It's a bit of analysis at the end there. Doesn't really matter here, but which way around they did the significance and which way around they did the analysis, they've got a P's paragraph. Okay, I'll point out another example, And I'm just going to point out here the significance. If I skip to the next point, I can see that we've got significance here. Okay, I can see the evidence just above. This is very significant because the natural abundance in oil, so that's natural resources, has led to Angola having the largest income per person at $5,170, as well as the GDP growth of 10.3%. Okay, so this person is saying to the examiner that they're making a judgment, an evaluation at the end of each point using that language of significance. This is very significant. Okay. If I skip down the bottom here, look, this is extremely significant because, okay. Next one. All right, let's have a look. This is significant. No measurement now, like measurement there, but they are evaluating as they go along at the end of each paragraph. Okay, next. All right then, so next thing I would like to point out is when we are looking at our evaluate questions, the 24 marker, and this goes into the 18 marker as well, is if we're looking at level 4 for the mark scheme, which is accessing 19 to 24 marks, it talks about the fact that for A03, you need to critically investigate the question to produce a coherent interpretation of quantitative and qualitative data evidence, comprehensively making meaningful connections to your subject knowledge, is how it basically ends. What that means is you must have regularly, okay, throughout your 18 and 24 markers, referred to the figures, okay, from the resource booklet across the breadth of the actual resource booklet. And a lot of the time the question will actually ask you to study or refer to a group of figures, okay, which you must do, explicitly use those, okay, in the answer. Now, to get level 4, the exam board, as I say, expect you to use those figures, and they actually give AO3 indicative content to us markers and examiners. So here is the AO3 for this question, and you can see that it's broken down, figure 9, 12, 12, 11, 3, 12, 12, 11, 10, 11, 11, 10. It's told the marker and the examiner what information could be lifted and used and quoted from the resource booklet in the student's answer. So we expect to see that in your answers. That's your evidence of the P's paragraph. Okay. Now, one bit of advice here is to make this as obvious as possible to the examiner. Okay. We want to see that. We've been told by the exam board that students should be using the figures and the data, okay, within the mark scheme that you can see on my screen. I want to see that in your answers, okay? But make it obvious to me. Now, if we go back to the visualizer, I'll show you what I mean. Discard those. This is a student's 24 marker here, and it's good. It's 18 out of 24. My issue here was that the student clearly uses the resource booklet. Up here, I've got them quoting 20 to 30% of minors, $50 per week here. If I move towards the bottom here, Sub-Saharan Africa from 4.7% in 2013 to 5.2% in 2014. Now, it's very easy for me to pick these out from the answer and match them to the mark scheme when they are numerical, okay, especially when it's quantitative data. It gets a little bit harder when it's qualitative, when students aren't directly quoting. And to be honest, I'd rather you didn't directly quote, because I think it reduces the space available and the time you've got to actually develop your points appropriately. But when it's qualitative data, it's quite difficult when you're paraphrasing to see that you're lifting and quoting from a resource. For both quantitative and qualitative, what I'd say is when you use anything from the resources, just put on your paper where you've got them from, okay? For example, here, let's say this was from figure 9, okay? Or maybe this here, this whole point is paraphrased from figure 11 and figure 12, okay? You can do this even at the end of the exam. You suddenly realize you didn't refer to figures in questions 4, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could go at the end and quickly do this, even if it means going to the end of a developed point and just put in the figures that you used for that entire developed point. This here makes it much easier for us markers and the examiner, okay, to pinpoint where you've used AO3 to help you access that level 4. Okay. Last one on looking at some models or some using answers as models, which is the next bit here. Give me a second. Here we go. Okay. Right, last bit then on reliability. So the mark scheme for level 4 also indicates that, ignore that, for level 4, 19 to 24 marks, that you need to make valid judgments about the value and reliability of the quantitative and qualitative data throughout, okay? So this is really a level 4 skill, and that is thinking about the sources of that data. Think back to your NEA and how you had to critically evaluate your sources that you used. You've got to do that in this resource as well. It really is a level 4 skill. And as a quick example, if we go back to the visualizer and we look at this answer here, and give me a second, this is not the answer, the part I wanted. Here it is. Okay, so just a quick example of this. This student has said here, the World Bank, a reputable source, says the growth looked to rise by around 0.5% between 2013 and 2014, although this was only a forecast. Now, it's a very brief example of someone starting to think about the reliability of the sources provided by the exam board. Could be a lot better than that. But if I, as an examiner, if I saw you doing that across the 18 and 24 marker in the manner that this student has, just as you're using the data, maybe just putting a couple of bracketed comments like that, I think that allows you to show evidence of that level 4 skill. Okay. Another example of that is if we take the back to one of the earlier questions, and one of the earlier questions asked you to look at this data table, and in the data table we've got a list of countries here, not all countries in the world, and it's one of the questions asked you about the reliability of this data. This would be something that you would kind of pick out from the resource booklet. And if we looked here, we'd see that we've got income per capita for 1 year, 2014, okay, and we are comparing it against percentage forest cover between 1990 and 2005. So there's something that you would look at the reliability of, in that we're comparing 1 year against 15 years. We are comparing a more recent year versus the most recent year here being 2005. So forest cover, percentage forest cover could have been afforested since 2005. So that there would just be something that you would kind of comment to the examiner on. That we've only got 1 year, and another one would be a period of 15 years, but the fact that that is now severely out of date because this is 2005. Okay, right, moving on back to the PowerPoint. And this is my last tip. Okay, so we're going back to the question here. Back to the question. Evaluate the view that the natural resources found in the 3 countries shown are more of a curse than a blessing. So remember, evaluate questions 18, 24 marker, paper 3 are about making 2 sides of an argument. One thing I've noticed is we're being very black and white, okay, about the argument you're providing to the examiner. It's really clean cut. It's, for this, it would be that on one side it is a curse, and on the other side it is a blessing, and that you would put all your points, okay, for curse on one side of the argument, all your points for blessing on the other side of the argument, but it's really, really, really black and white. One side versus the other side, all these points together versus all these points together, and that there's no real difference between the points within curse, one side of the argument, and all the points within blessing, the other side of the argument. I think for level 4, we need to be better at evaluating than that. Okay, I'm going to try and work through that. So let's say we're doing this question. Evaluate the view that geography is taught excellently at Key Stage 4. Now, there are nearly 160 students in our current Year 11 cohort. And I think if we ask them that question, has geography been taught excellently? I don't think it would be black and white, yes versus no, okay? I don't think we're just going to ask that question. Every student will go, yes, because he has 3 reasons. No, he has 3 reasons. Or yes, he has 4 developed reasons. Or no, he has 4 developed reasons. I don't think it's as black and white, as clean cut as that. It probably looks more like this, okay, on a spectrum, okay? So we've got the yeses on one side and the no's on the other. So let's imagine the middle of my spectrum, these arrows on the screen, is neutral. And then far left is hard yes. Like, yes, geography is taught excellently. Maybe a bit of a softer yes towards the neutral. Yeah, it is taught well. However, on the right-hand side, firm, hard no. Okay, it's not taught well. Towards neutral, actually, it's not taught that well. However, so what I'm trying to get at is that if I asked 160 students, or nearly 160 students, was geography taught excellently at Key Stage 4, I might find some students up here. Okay, so let's say I had, I don't know, 20 students here. Some students might not be that extreme in the answer. So let's say we had about 10 here. Maybe we had like, I don't know, 30 soft yeses. Maybe actually we had a lot of students said a little bit more yes than no. So maybe we've got about 20 here. Neutral, students who just sat on the fence. Let's say we've got, I don't know, 10 here. Maybe there's like some really extreme hard no's. Let's say I've got 20 extreme hard no's. You get the point. Nearly 160 responses to that question, okay, would be on a spectrum from hard yes to neutral to hard no, okay? Now, in my actual answer, I would be evaluating one side, which would be the yes side, versus the other side, the no side here. But within my 2 sides of my argument, I'm going to be showing the examiner that the points I use in one side, let's say the yes, aren't all to the same standard of yes, okay? That there's differences within them, okay? And again, on my other side of the argument of no, all the points I use on that side aren't all exactly the same, okay, in their agreement of one another. Okay, I'm showing that I'm evaluating the points within the 2 sides. here's another example that to try help. So we now got evaluate, a bit more like the question you on this Psalms, evaluate the view that Brexit is more of a curse than a blessing for the UK. So again, instead of looking at this black and white, okay, because if we talk to people across the UK, it's not just going to be curse, blessing, okay. Within the curse camp and within the blessing camp, there's going to be differences of opinion. There's going to be differences on how far they agree with that point, okay. Some people will be a hard yes, okay. Let's say this side of the argument is curse, okay, and this side of the argument is blessing. So Brexit is a curse, and Brexit is a blessing. So within this, you'll find that some people would be much harder in their opinion, much softer. Again, on the other side, much harder, much softer. So within the points of the two sides of the argument that I make, there's going to be a spectrum, okay? This can be shown, like if I just come off this, and I did a quick Google earlier, and here, right? So when I'm looking at that spectrum, just flick back to it, that spectrum here from hard yes to hard no, from the fact that some people would see it as a curse and some would see it as a blessing, but not everyone would say exactly the same or would say it to the same extent, okay? And there's reasons behind that, which this would come into your please paragraph, right? So an obvious one would be, why could there be a difference in whether they think it's a blessing or a curse, and how far they think it's a blessing, and how far they think it's a curse? Well, maybe it could come down to, and this is me trying to give you ways to think about that final judgment you make about significance. It could be about where they actually are from. Look, this is UK votes by region. Blue is Remain, okay, and red is Leave, okay. So geographical location could influence how extreme their views are on it being a curse or a blessing. Another one could be via age, okay. So here we could see that we've got Leave and Remain, okay. So again, looking at that idea of it being the Brexit being a blessing, well, that's going to be Leave, or Brexit being a curse, that would be Remain, part of the EU. And even within that argument of blessing versus curse, there's going to be differences in age group between the ages. Because look here, 73% of 18 to 24-year-olds wanted to remain. Okay, so if I go back to my spectrum, okay, those who are younger are going to be thinking Brexit's a curse, and they're going to be up here. They're going to be the hard yeses, that age group. Okay, but if I go back here, we could look at 35 to 44-year-olds, or even 25 to 34-year-olds, and look, 52%, 62%. So these two age groups would also, on the spectrum, be leaning towards it being a curse, but they're probably more of a softer curse than the age group below them. So they're still on the same side of the argument, but we're going to be making a different judgment by how far they agree with it being a curse. Okay, again, we are evaluating to a higher level to the examiner. I go back to the resources, okay, or the resources I've Googled. This could be resources in a booklet. And I scroll up here. So if I looked at this here, it's not what I wanted. Let's look at something else. Keep looking. All right. So over here, we've got Brexit wasn't the big issue for most. Okay. So here's another reason why people might vary in terms of whether they are curse or blessing for Brexit, and how far they agree with it being a curse or blessing could come down to on their different opinions and different policies. Okay, so some may have decided that they wanted to leave, they wanted Brexit because immigration was the main factor motivating them to make that choice. But there'll be other people who wanted to leave the EU, but that wasn't their main reason why. So there's different policies that could have influenced how far they are on the spectrum. Keep going up here. This here, so UK's top 10 partners: Germany, Netherlands, France, Belgium, Ireland, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, they're in the EU. However, USA, China, and that's it, just USA and China are not. And therefore, here's another reason why people might be on the different elements of the spectrum between curse and blessing about Brexit for the UK. Would be actually, if they're not in the EU, they may have that might completely change their perspective, and that might shift them up and down that spectrum. And I would use that in my piece paragraph and then the significance of my judgments. And then the other one here, so this one shows you goods between these main countries of the EU, and from Britain to these countries, and to Britain from these countries. So the countries themselves and how big they are of a trading partner with Britain, that would also influence people's opinion on how far they agree or disagree. And here's another example. I go back to the actual visualizer. I got these through the post over the weekend. So here, so we've got the EU elections coming up, and the Lib Dems, who in our pamphlet here are giving me an evaluation of Brexit. They're giving me two sides. Okay, we've got a vote for Brexit, and they've lumped Conservative, Labour, UKIP, and the Brexit Party all together on one side of the argument. Okay, or a vote for the Liberal Democrats, which is on the other side. So if we went back to our scale here, the Lib Dems are trying to make it black and white, but it's not. It's a spectrum. So we're probably finding that along this side of Brexit being a blessing, we would probably find that Brexit Party is probably up here, and potentially UKIP. I'd probably have to look at their policies to determine how far they are along this spectrum and how who is further on the other. I haven't really looked at those parties' policies. And then we're probably going to find we've got the Conservative Party here, but within the Conservative Party, there are splits, so they probably range across this part of the spectrum. Labour here, okay, although again, there's splits in their party across neutral into the other side. And the Lib Dems are clearly setting themselves out over here. But the Liberal Democrats, if we go back to the visualizer, have forgotten to point out any other parties on this side of the argument. They're trying to make it black and white, us versus all of them, okay? But it's not, it's a spectrum. The Liberal Democrats clearly politically trying to say they're the only alternative to this. There's other parties like the Green Party and SNP, which would fall on our spectrum on this side. They would come along here on the spectrum. So even though it's two sides of the argument, leave, remain, curse, blessing, there is variations and opinions on this scale, and they can come all down to different regions of the UK that you lived in, how old you are, okay, trading partners within, outside the EU, onto political policies, ideologies, policies, and so forth, okay? And then if I go back to the visualizer to cement this, we come here, this is the Brexit parties, and you know, the Brexit Party supposedly are on, if it was black and white, they're all together here. This is just one side of the argument. They're all together. Well, they're not, because here we can see language-wise, these European elections were not supposed to happen. June 2016, 17.4 million voted to leave the EU. Okay. Yet almost 3 years later, the government and MPs have betrayed Brexit. Okay. The language here is suggesting the Brexit Party, although they're on the same side as the Conservatives, or the majority of the Conservatives in terms of Brexit, okay, i.e. that Brexit is a blessing for the UK, they are clearly distancing themselves from the Conservatives. So this is me evaluating, okay, on my spectrum, that the Brexit Party would not, it's not just black and white, they're not all together with Conservatives. I'm evaluating and I'm showing significance here, okay, that they are further up that spectrum's arrow. Okay. Let's connect this back to geography then. Oh, there is geography in that, obviously, but let's connect it a little bit back to that exam question. So lastly, if I'm looking at this question again, so evaluate the view that the natural resource found in the three countries shown are more of a curse than a blessing for the people and the environment. It's not black and white. It's not just curse, blessing, and all your points in curse and all your points in blessing are exactly the same weighting. Okay, we need to be more evaluative than that. Think of it as a spectrum. Okay, all right. Again, the fact that curse versus blessing, it's not just black and white. Now let's say you had 6 points here, okay, that let's say point 1 is up here, your second point was about here, your third point's like here, your fourth point's down here, your fifth point's here, your 6 points more here, and then this would feed into an overall conclusion where you make an overall judgment, okay, link it back to the exam question. So the points you make, you need to think about being more evaluative. You need to make sure you do that significance element. And that's going back to think about, let's just discard, sorry. Think about what we looked at when we were looking at paper 1 and 2's walkthrough, which is this here. When we're looking at each point you make, at the end, use this language here to weigh up each point. Okay, so you're saying this therefore shows that whatever you're talking about is extremely important, as showing that natural resources are a blessing for people in the environment. This point shows that natural resources are partially a curse for the country shown because. Okay. This shows that the natural resources are moderately important at being a blessing because. So that you're making sure that you're referring to this idea of it being a spectrum, okay, that your points are across that spectrum on both sides of the argument, and you're using the language of talking about how far each point agrees with that side of the argument. Okay, how far does that point agree with it being a blessing? Extremely, significantly, substantially, moderately, partially, slightly, not at all. How far does that point agree with it being a curse? Extremely, significantly, substantially, moderately, partially, slightly, and so on. It's a spectrum. My last point. So when we think about evaluate questions, and even though you might be given two sides of an argument, okay, there's one side versus the other, it's not clean cut, it's not black and white, okay? Not every point on one side of the argument is going to be of the same importance. It's not every point on the other side of the argument can be of the same importance. Within that, there are shades of grey. That's how I want you to think about evaluate questions. Think 50 shades of grey, okay? From look at this grey through to this grey. It's all grey, okay, but there are differences between them. This 50 shades could be the way you think about the whole argument, that spectrum, okay, that between all the points on your spectrum, okay, there are different shades, and the points are of different levels of importance to the overall language of the question. Or even if we thought about 50 Shades of Grey for one side of the argument, if this was all side one of your argument, if this was all about, okay, resources being a curse, okay, between all the points that you can make about it being a curse, okay, there are going to be shades of importance to the points you make. And let's say then you looked at the other side of the argument and you thought again about 50 Shades of Grey, or the point on the other side about it being a blessing, okay, there's going to be differences, okay, within that side as well. And the examiner wants to see that you're thinking not black and white, but that there are shades of grey. Okay, there is a spectrum within the points you make, both sides of the argument. I hope that helped.